Among car enthusiasts, the Mazda 3 Liftback is certainly among the favorites. At a little over 130,000 ringgit, this is definitely a vehicle that is in a lot of people's views. But the problem is, the vehicle that I have here with me today, this specific model, is the Mazda 3 1.5 GVC High, not the High Plus. This is the entry-level Mazda 3 hatchback, fully imported from Japan with a relatively small 1.5 litre naturally aspirated engine under the bonnet. So some would say this is the less desirable Mazda 3 liftback. But today we're going to find out if this is actually all the Mazda 3 liftback that you need. My name is AIMAN ABDULLAH, this is Malaysian Motoring, and this is our review of the Mazda 3 Liftback 1.5 High. So, because today is very hot and because I forgot sunscreen, we're going to try and do this walk around relatively quickly. So at the front, for the Mazda 3 Liftback, the framing around the grille is done up in black rather than chrome on the saloon. Because this is merely the high model and not the High Plus, don't ask us about the naming convention, we get bi-beam LED headlights with LED indicators but with a bulb type daytime running light. And you also lose out on Mazda's signature daytime running light design, which admittedly does kind of make the car look not as nice as it could be lah. You also don't have fog lights, although that is a Mazda thing now. The idea is that the LED headlight should be strong enough that it negates the need to have fog lights. Down the side, you have relatively small alloy wheels measuring in at just 16 inches. Now, I can't remember the last time I saw a car above 130,000 ringgit with rims this small and with tires this thick. However, these are Yokohama rubbers and they are pretty good, as we will talk about in the driving section. Down the side, a lot of people like to talk about the design of the Mazda 3 because it is a departure from what we've seen from previous generation Mazda vehicles. But this is representative of what Mazdas of the future will look like. As you can see down the side, you have almost no hard lines. Everything here is smooth. It's a play of surfaces where you have this concave and convex play along the side. Admittedly, in this dark blue color, it's quite difficult to see, but in the signature Soul Red Mica, it looks absolutely brilliant. Or is it Soul Red Pearl? One of those two. Now, coming here, as you can see, you have a chrome strip that comes all the way up here, but coming to the C-pillar, this has also been talked about quite a bit because as you can see, there is a lot of metal here. And so there are some questions regarding visibility as well as the overall cabin ambience. But again, we will get to that in the driving portion. Down at the rear, you get LED taillights, full LED taillights. However, again, this is not the Mazda signature taillight design. And as such, it looks good, but at night you know that it could have been illuminated a little bit better. You also get an integrated spoiler here, which helps to improve aerodynamics as the air comes over the car. You also get a couple of exhaust tips, real exhaust tips. These are actual exhaust exits, and they sound pretty good, even though this is merely a 1.5. Now, since we're back here, we're going to talk about practicality. And once you get over the relatively deep lip and this relatively large drop, you actually get a decent amount of space back here. There are no features in the sense that there are no tie-down hooks, there's nothing really going on back here. It's just a large, square, usable space. And despite the fact that this car has quite a sloping roofline, you can still stack things up quite well all the way up to the parcel shelf. So, that is the exterior of the Mazda 3. Now let's go on the inside where there's air conditioning. Now, inside the Mazda 3 Liftback, there is quite a lot for us to talk about. So even though this is the lower or entry-level Mazda 3 Liftback, it certainly doesn't feel that entry-level in here. Sure, you do get fabric seats, but the fabric itself is actually quite nice. The seats themselves are the same design as what you get in the High Plus, and so you get plenty of lateral support, and lumbar support in this car is actually pretty good. But beyond that, all the materials in here are really nice. You get soft touch materials up here, you get leather with stitching down the side, more leather down here, fabric here. Even the front of the dash is nice and soft touch too. The top of the dash is soft as well. And the steering wheel is still leather wrapped as standard. And as a result, inside it just feels really nice and really premium. Ahead of you sits a heads-up display, which unfortunately is black and white, but it is relatively high definition, so you get your driving information such as your speed, your cruise control settings, and all are displayed there. You get a digital instrument cluster up ahead of you, or a combination instrument cluster, because you have the tachometer on the left as well as your temperature and fuel gauge on the right in actual dials, and the one in the middle, it looks like a physical dial, but it actually isn't. In the center, you get Mazda's typical MZD Connect system, which is now on a screen that is a little bit too far away to touch, which is fine because you can't touch it anyway. Instead, everything is controlled via the center stack. So you have your volume button here, which can control the volume, obviously. You also have the rotary knob here with shortcut buttons for home, entertainment, and navigation. You also have a back button for obvious reasons. You have your drive mode selector here, which allows you to select between sport and normal, and you get an electric parking brake, which means you also get an auto hold function. Auto hold, of course, is a feature that I like very much. It does help a lot in traffic jams and at traffic lights. Now, beyond this, you get more buttons up here. Because this is only the high and not the high plus, you get a single zone air conditioning system. It's not even climate control. And to me, that feels a little bit weird because, like it or not, this car is near as damn it 140,000 ringgit, and as a result, I would expect to see climate control. Even single zone pun jadilah. But just having air conditioning controls, it just seems a bit weird. But that said, when you are adjusting the air conditioning controls and touching all the buttons and everything, it just feels really high quality. All the buttons, all the switchgear in here feels really well engineered, and as a result, the car feels really posh and premium. Even things like the window controls just feels nice to touch and hold and manipulate and play with. It's nice to be in here. It doesn't feel like you're in an entry-level anything for that matter, until you try and adjust the driver's seat, which is manual. In fact, you will realize that this car is not as posh as it could be when you try and get in it, because unfortunately this car, while it comes with a push button start, it doesn't come with keyless entry, which is really weird. I can't remember the last time I got into a car of this nature that didn't come with keyless entry. But in any case, this seat is set up in my driving position, which is something that's worth talking about as well. Mazda has always been very good with driving positions, and as I'm sitting here, the pedals are in the right place, the footrest is in the right place. I can get the steering wheel to exactly my position, and thanks to the myriad of adjustments in the seat, which allow you to adjust the angle and the height and all that nonsense, you can get a good driving position really well. And once you're here, visibility is great, except out of the C, like kind of your over-the-shoulder view. That's not so great, but mercifully the mirrors are big enough to sort of negate that. Anyway, since I set the seat up in my position, why don't we go and move to the back and see what's what. Now, in the back of the Mazda 3 hatch, there are some things that I like and some things I don't. So I'm going to start with things that I like. For starters, as I said earlier, this seat is set up in my driving position, and I'm a little over 160 centimeters tall, and I have plenty of knee room and I have plenty of headroom. Although this car may look like it's not the best for rear seat passengers, I have to say the amount of room back here is pretty commendable. The other thing I like is the fact that build quality has not been compromised here. You still get the same soft top door cards and even more of this leather and stitching and fabric all the way around, and everything here feels good. Even the buttons back here, even the door release in this car feels good. There's also an armrest here which integrates the cup holders, and to be honest, to be sat back here like this, I get pretty good support, especially on my under thighs as well as my lateral support, and as a result, I could be back here for quite a lot of time and still be quite comfortable. Now, these are things that I like. Let's talk about the things that this infotainment system is just trying to absolutely ruin my takes, but we're going to gloss over that very quickly. So now let's talk about the things I don't quite like. For starters, this belt line keeps going higher and higher. So sat back here with my head on the headrest, I have to say that my peripheral vision isn't so great. I suspect that children in car seats, of which there are 2 ISOFIX mounts on either side, smaller children may get car sick back here because the interior is quite dark and it's relatively difficult to get a view out. On top of that, it must be noted that in the Malaysian market, it is almost criminal to not offer rear air conditioning vents, particularly given the fact that the dashboard design of this car means that it doesn't actually have any central vents. The 4 vents are centered around the front driver and as opposed to the rear driver, and centered around the driver and the front passenger. And as a result, you need to push those vents in such a way in order to get any sort of airflow back here. So not having rear aircon vents is a little bit of a crime. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, thanks to those very thick C-pillars, you don't get any more light flooding in sort of behind your head to help make the cabin feel a little bit more airy. When you pair that with the fact the fabric in this car is very dark colored, it feels a little bit dingy, if I'm honest. I'm certain that it'd be very comfortable and very refined, but it's just that I don't really want to spend that much time back here because it feels dark and cramped, and that's certainly not what you want from a car that's pushing 140k on the road. But on the road is where Mazdas tend to shine, and we have been told many times by Burmas that although this may not represent the flagship of the Mazda 3 range, we can still expect to enjoy the same sort of Mazda zoom driver focus qualities. So let's get back into the front seat and take this car out for a drive and see what that's like. The thing about a Mazda is that it is all about the drive. And so behind the wheel of the Mazda 3, things start to make sense again. So yes, I understand that this is the entry-level model for the Mazda 3 hatch range. So it's powered by a 1.5 litre 4-cylinder engine with power going to the front wheels via a 6-speed automatic gearbox. Output numbers are meagre at best. And in this segment, a 1.5 litre is certainly a little bit down on power, especially given the fact that in this segment, in terms of naturally aspirated options, things tend to start at 1.6 to 1.8 litres. But that said, the Mazda 3 is certainly no slouch. Even though it has a relatively small engine, because it is a SkyActiv engine, it means that it is not only incredibly practical, but it's also very zingy, as I will now demonstrate. This engine might not have a lot to give, but it's very happy to give as much of it as it can. It's such a rev-happy engine. It's been such a long time since I've driven a car that's so happy to be revved out, to have the nuts revved off of it. It is so much fun. And because of this sense of eagerness that you get from the car, you just tend to have a lot more fun in it. Thanks to the smaller wheels, however, it does mean that, lateral traction is slightly compromised over the 2-litre High Plus. But that said, because the alloy wheels are smaller and the tyres are a little bit thicker, it does help the primary ride a little bit more. That is particularly helpful given the fact that our pock-marked road surfaces means that larger alloy wheels tend to take quite a bashing. So at least in this car, you don't have to be quite so worried. But that engine, though, rev-happy and very willing to be revved out, it is actually incredibly frugal. Over the weekend that we've had this car has been on a proper high-performance run. It's been driven through some really twisty tracks in the hands of one of our other presenters, and I've been driving it around about in town, as well as a quick jaunt on the motorway. And even then, despite all of that, over the last 536 kilometers, this car has been averaging a very respectable 7.5 litres per 100 kilometers. Now, I have no doubt that that figure could be greatly improved upon if you drive in a more sensible and reasonable manner, which we certainly have not always been, which means that this car should return very respectable fuel consumption numbers in day-to-day driving scenarios. Now, there is a sore point with this car, however, in terms of what you experience from behind the wheel, and that is in terms of safety. The Mazda 3 1.5 High unfortunately does not come with any active safety features whatsoever. This car does not come with blind spot monitoring or AEB or rear cross traffic alert or anything of that sort, and I feel like that is a little bit of a disappointment. You see, this car is such a solid presentation. The engine is great, the chassis is great, the ride and handling is fantastic, there's very little in terms of wind and road noise, and overall, this would be a very easy car to recommend, except because of its lack of active safety, I would hesitate slightly. I think that in order to buy one of these, given the fact that they are slightly more expensive than the competition, you really have to make an active decision to compromise on active safety, which really should not be an area that you should compromise on. Vehicles like the Honda Civic, as well as other mid-range contenders, mid-size contenders like the Toyota Corolla Altis and even the Corolla Cross SUV, for example, offer a little bit more in the way of active safety. I think, especially in this car, given the relatively compromised or difficult visibility, given the rising belt line, the large seat pillars, I think the lack of blind spot monitoring especially is borderline criminal. But if you are the sort of driver that is willing to make that compromise, if you're the sort of driver and owner who says that the driving experience comes above all else, and sod it with active safety, I should be the active person in the car. I understand that that is a perfectly valid and whether or not sensible is up to you. But while that is a perfectly valid point of view, I personally stand and err on the side of safety. But if you are the sort of person who believes that you are the safest part of any car, and as a result you are willing to make that compromise, and you know that it's not going to rear its ugly head later in the game, then the Mazda 3 hatch 1.5 litre high is recommendable. This car is very impressive. This engine is fantastic. It drives great. The ride is great. I'm very impressed by this overall presentation. I expected to be underwhelmed given the fact that this is the entry-level variant, but instead I know that I'll be able to walk away from this being thoroughly impressed. I just wish it had a little bit more in terms of active safety. In any case, that's been my review of the Mazda 3 1.5 Liftback High. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell icon so you're notified every time we make a new upload. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. All the links are in the description below. And if you'd like to follow me, the links to my socials are in the description below too. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one. Take care, stay safe, jangan bodoh.